Wow. That video is part of From the Inside Out, a production of the Mount Hope High School Vocal Ensemble, led by our guest tonight, David Loria. David, welcome to really the first episode of an ongoing attempt to reach out to community music, to community theater, to community performers, and integrate them into our network here. Community Sounds is the show. David, welcome to Community Sounds.
Pat, thank you so much for having me, and I am thrilled that you're getting this started. It's something that Rhode Island sorely needs, and we have so much incredible talent around here, and not nearly enough places where we can feature it.
Well, let me tell you folks just a little bit about this effort, and we're going to do kind of a mini telethon here for the cause that this is supporting. That is the Providence Rescue Mission. During the show, from now until about 8 o'clock, and, well, quite frankly, if you mention it sometime when you donate the coalition, we're going to match dollar for dollar up to $100 worth of contributions to the effort to support the Providence Rescue Mission. The effort itself, obviously, in honor of first responders, folks who are community providers of health care, some of the services that perhaps, like the mail and communications that we took pre-COVID so much for granted. And this effort that we're going to talk about tonight was really a multi-month pre-COVID, post-COVID combination of the talents of the students at Mount Hope and the efforts and the skills of the music teaching staff at Mount Hope. So I got to tell you, I'm I can be pretty cynical. I was blown away by that. So let's talk about everything. Let's dive right into it. David, you come from you are the choral director there. You are also the director of music, if you will, at St. Luke's, which is, of course, all known to us on the East Bay. You are also you have quite the musical background yourself. You perform locally, and you graduated from really, I believe, one of the 2 or 3 top music schools in America. Tell us about your musical experience and your background.
Sure. So I was a performing musician for many years, working full time, playing in different bands. One of which was an original rock trio that recorded and toured through the 90s called DJ Lauria Band. That was me. I've played with wedding and function bands. Boston Premiere is one that's still playing that I played with for quite a long time. I have a tribute to George Harrison called By George, which is kind of the most recent thing. I've been fortunate in that my son is old enough now that he can play drums in a band with me. So he and I have that band together and we have a great time playing. But my thing for many years was playing professionally, as I said, and teaching kind of on the side. But my second career has been teaching in schools, and I've been a full-time teacher for 8 years now. The last 4 of them at Mount Hope in Bristol, where I was just so fortunate to become the choral director and also to run what is the digital audio classes, which is where we teach students essentially how to make music on computers and using all of the great technology that we have nowadays. And you can see how something like that just dovetails very nicely with the idea of let's create some new music too. Let's record the group. We've got all these people here who know how to do this stuff. Let's put them all together.
Well, as a graduate of Berkeley, as a composition major, and also coming together in combination with your years on the road, really brings sort of a unique perspective on both the skills, the love of music, but also the production emphasis on music. Tell us about some of the classes that you teach in terms of production and composition.
So I teach 2 levels of this digital audio, which we talked about, and that takes students through the process of creating music kind of in the modern context. My upbringing was get a bunch of people in the basement together, turn your amps up loud and start playing and see what comes out. But that is not the experience nowadays. It's not how music is done nearly as much. So much is created on computer, and it's still collaborative, but it's much different. So we worked with learning how to do that, most of my students start out by creating beats. They'll work on sort of hip hop type beats and work out from there. But we have a very strong foundation in songwriting sections, understanding that no matter what style of music you are writing and no matter what tools or instruments, whether it's computers or guitar-based drums, the song should still have form. They should make sense to the listener. If you're doing a verse-chorus song, verse-chorus, then they need to be set up in such a way that the listener knows what's happening and doesn't get lost in your electronic doodles. So we spent a lot of time also talking about the basics of songwriting. And I even had I'm going to be teaching a songwriting class this coming year, which I'm looking forward to. But in previous years, I've had a sort of a part-time group, just a once in a while thing where we would get together and talk about songwriting. And the first thing I would do with all of those students, whether they were these electronic types or whether they were singer-songwriters, is just sit down with a notebook and go write by yourself for 5 minutes, everything that comes into your head. Work on your lyrics, even if you've never written lyrics before. And let's start to think about songs as being not just those electronic beeps and boops, but a narrative and a point of view and all of the things that go into a good lyric too. So it's fun, and there's so much that goes into it. We managed to cover, I think, a good deal of it for high school.
Mm-hmm. No, it sounds outstanding. As someone who is was left in the dust by the now infamous music theory AP exam in 19 1978, I can tell you that was one of the more decimating experiences of my academic life. So it sounds like you are actually preparing students for that. Now, this dovetails quite nicely. And by the way, if you're just joining us, David Loria, he is the choral director at Mount Hope High School in Bristol. They have put together a production that we're going to be featuring tonight. They're doing so in honor of the Providence Rescue Mission. And we're doing kind of a mini telethon here. If you hear this now or you hear this, there's a link both on Mr. Loria's page. There's a link on the coalition page. There's a link on my personal page where someone can just contribute to a GoFundMe. We were doing kind of a tiny match here to make it fun. If you mention the coalition after the show, or if you do it while the show's on, we're going to match it up to $100. They've got a nice goal set up. They're doing it, of course, in honor of the first responders and the emergency providers and the service providers and the medical personnel and the post office and the fire, all the people who have had to work through this and this difficult period, this era of COVID-19. So it's an outstanding cause. But there's a great backstory to this, because I'd like to have you talk to us about how the production that we just saw and some of the songs we just listened to were developed, both, I guess, pre and right into the heart of the remote distance learning program. Give us the backstory there.
Sure. The past few years, we've done an original piece for graduation and performed it at our graduation ceremony. So this year we were planning on doing something similar. And we had the song that you just heard, You Love, which we had done kind of earlier in the year. And we figured, we're going to the state choral festival. Wouldn't it be fantastic to debut our new song at the State Choral Festival? And then it ends up sort of being our theme song for the rest of the year, and we use it at graduation, and it just becomes something that ties together our whole school year. And then the roof fell in, and school stopped. So we didn't have the festival, and all of our concerts were canceled, and graduation, in fact, ended up being virtual. So we sort of brainstormed, what can we do that would, I think, honor our seniors, especially the students who ended up losing the most personally when school closed, and yet still be a useful musical project and engage people. So, at first we decided we would record this, and that would be great. But then it started to grow. And the idea of having each of the seniors sing a solo on it just felt like a perfect complement to what we already had. And so I approached all the seniors and asked them if they would like to do it. And that brought us down a completely different rabbit hole, where we had to figure out, so now where can we get music that isn't going to cost us anything to use? So we did a bunch of research, and if you happen to see the track listing for this album, you'll see that all of these songs, save the ones that we wrote specifically for it, are at least 100 years old. Give My Regards to Broadway is on here with a very different version for people who've heard the song before, but that's out of copyright. Sidewalks of New York is a song from 1904. It's out of copyright. So we didn't have to pay for those. We could do our own arrangement of them, and then include it on the album without problems with the copyright police, so to speak.
Right.
So that was all the planning stage for this, and then the recording stage was where we actually had to face the fact that we couldn't be in the same room. That whole get everybody in the basement and start playing wasn't going to work. So there's a lot of email back and forth. There were a lot of Google meetings, such as this. A lot of discussion about what the songs would sound like, a lot of discussion about point of view. And we have some great theater majors who took part in this. And they really looked at this as, who is this character who's singing this particular song? So we went down those alleys as well, and eventually ended up having to record it where they're listening to the backing tracks in earbuds and singing into their phones. And frequently it took many takes to get one that would be of decent enough fidelity that we could record it, include it in a recording such as this. We're ecstatic with what we came up with, but it was a lot of work and a lot of planning and a lot of trial and error before we really got it together.
That's astonishing. I mean, we all know the technology has come a tremendous way. I mean, this effort that we do here at the Coalition Radio Network is a testament to the ability of ordinary folks to grab a hold of extraordinary technology. But the management skills that you use, the teaching skills that you employed, as well as the talents and the work ethic of the students that you mentor, it's wow. To do that kind of quality work on an iPhone and to integrate it using classroom technology is again stunning. I can't say enough. The how many man hours, women hours, kiddo hours, whatever? How much time did this take?
I genuinely have no idea. I can tell you that some people have started to see the articles, I think, the online articles about how when you see those wonderful choral Brady Bunch type videos, which similar to what we just did here, and you think, oh, well, our group should do that too. Why don't they do that? Well, the reason that perhaps they haven't done it is that you need to have a backing track recorded. You need to have everyone sing their parts separately. Then those need to get brought onto the computer and lined up and possibly tuned a little bit. And it's painstaking and slow. And then you might run into something such as when I'm pleading with students to make certain that they do this in the quietest possible place in their house, which they may be, but if the quietest possible place is next to a window and somebody comes roaring down the street on a Harley halfway through the take, that's going to be in the background. So we had to go back and try to noise reduce things like that as best we could. If I were going to guess, just the song that you've heard, You Love, was at least 70 hours of time for that 3-minute song.
Wow.
So the others weren't all big choral numbers, so not quite as much, but it was a lot for 11 songs.
Well, and two, it's a very practical lesson for these young folks in the realities of studio recording, the realities of the music business. I mean, anyone who's spent any time in a studio working on even a basement quality production understands that this is not a Disney movie where folks just show up and rehearse for 2 hours and then all of a sudden put on a show. The reality of professional music, the professional performances is that they are painstaking and they take many, many hours in terms of training and then practicing and then actually the final execution to get it up to that level where we just, as consumers of media, just sit back and go, oh, that's kind of cool. Not understanding the incredible amount of sweat equity that goes into a production. I think perhaps that may have been the greatest lesson of all from this. And again, it's an outstanding one to learn so young. The dedication it takes to put on productions for the people that they'll enjoy and that they'll admire. We're gonna play a track right now. I'm gonna leave it up to super producer Joel to pick which one, and maybe you can give us a little comment on what was involved and why you chose this, and perhaps if some of the folks involved in actually singing. You can just talk right over it.
Okay, great.
Heard you rolling, so how you feel tonight?
I've been fantastic named Robbie Pop. And Bob is one of our premier mixer producers in the digital audio class that I have to say that this is literally the only track on the album that I had nothing to do with. Rob took this from start to finish, created all of it, and anyone who's into this style of music will notice the incredible attention to detail in all aspects of this, in the production, in the arrangement, where you have the little instruments coming in and out where you don't expect them and everything catching your ear. And the vocalist is perfect. He did an outstanding job. He's a senior who's going to be moving on to music school as well. and wants to be a professional producer, I think of anyone I've ever met, he's got a great shot at being.
How many kiddos, and I say they're kiddos my age, but I have 20-something-year-old children. Do you, since you've taken this program up to really a new level, have you found young people looking to pursue the arts, music, performance professionally?
I don't know. I think that there's always the worry, and it's practical and it is appropriate. What am I going to do if I get that degree? What will I do when I'm done? Will there be work out there for me? Will there be some place to go? So it's scary, and I think what we see is that the people who are 100% committed are the ones who will go down that path. So certainly we have many, and Mount Hope over the years has had. One of our last concerts, we tried to come up with a list of all of the people in, say, the last 25 years who from the school have been involved in professional music in some way, and we couldn't fit it on the concert program. There were so many of them. Mm-hmm. So I think that our history and our reputation help us there. That students know when they get involved in this program that they at least have a shot of continuing on with it.
Right.
And ones who are willing to take the leap once they go to college, I hope they're pretty well prepared to get started.
Well, you know, I see your point. You're talking to the father of someone who went to art school for 4 years. So I understand that leap. In fact, another time I'd love to have a conversation with you about the commitment to the arts. I'll just say briefly, one of the more interesting interviews I've ever heard was with the actor Jeff Daniels, and it was on NPR a couple of years ago. And he was asked a question: why is someone who, from Michigan, who made his way out to Hollywood and at all, what was his one of his causes for success? And he pointed out that he did jump into it full time. There was no safety net. There was no part-time job. There was no anything other than hustling side jobs and finding parts and acting. And there's an entire conversation to be had about how to, and that's true really of any profession they pursue. Your commitment to it, ultimately, what part of the ingredients is that leads to your success? If you're just joining us again, we are running a little bit of a telethon here. We want to point out more accurately, that's probably the best point. We've got David Loria. He is the choral director at Mount Hope High School, as well as a number of other functions, including teaching and working with children at the church level, and also working as a professional musician. He and his students have collaborated on really a stunning project for their what was too early terminated, if you will, a school year. They've produced music. It's on Spotify. We've got the links to Spotify and iTunes and YouTube up on the Coalition and my personal Facebook page. We'll continue to share them. The beneficiaries of this are the Providence Rescue Mission. So they are running a GoFundMe in lieu of charging for the performance. So you can download any one of these tracks for free, but also take a few minutes to contribute to the Providence Rescue Mission. Did your students choose Providence Rescue Mission, and what was the impetus behind that?
So we were looking for a worthy charity. I've actually run fundraisers for them in the past. So that's kind of a place that's already dear to my heart. We sort of had a general discussion about it, and then they said, okay, Mr. Loria, if you have somewhere specific, that would be great. But our feeling was that, keep in mind that we chose this at the time that it seemed like every day the pandemic got worse and worse, and the more information that we got, obviously, the scarier it was. And I think pretty unanimously, the students felt that we wanted to do something that would benefit the homeless and the underprivileged, those who do not have means, because when something like this happens, they are the first to suffer and the longest to suffer. Mm-hmm. So that's how we came to it. But when it was decided to where specifically we would donate this money, as I said, that was my choice. You mentioned that I also work at St. Luke's Church, and we have produced 3 albums there over the past, I think, about 10 years or so, that had fundraisers attached to them as well. And 2 of those were fundraisers for the rescue mission.
You know, as someone who's supposed to be a parent and an adult in a situation, and you face something like this pandemic, and you know, right now, if you're listening to this in the future, it's mid-June of 2020, and all of a sudden we're being, and I say carefully, we're being treated to news that there are upswings in the rate of infection and transmission across the country after a period of time that many had thought this might be in remission at some level. It can be terrifying and challenging if you're a quote-unquote adult. How much did the community nature of this project, the teamwork involved, the intense amount of time, and when participating at the incredible focus one had to have in order to finish this at the level that you did, how much of that do you think was really a way to get kids away from this daily reality?
That was a huge part of it, without question. I think that having something like this to rally around was incredibly important. We saw, there was this, as I mentioned, it just seemed as though, and it did, the things got worse and worse each day as we learned more. And for a long time, we were sort of on the bubble of, are we going back to school? Are we going to be able to still have a concert at the end of the year where we have graduation? Will we have our spring musical? We were going to do Legally Blonde as our school musical. And I can tell you that the day that got canceled was just awful for our seniors. We have this wonderfully talented group who are great musicians and actors, and they're all involved in our theater department as well. And it was crushing. They're wonderful, wonderful people, and obviously they have a worldview. But at that particular moment, here was the thing that was most important to them personally, and that got taken away. So we really were looking for another project that we could kind of put our mental energy into and dedicate ourselves to. Obviously not like we would the musical. There's no substitute for that, but at least something that would really be meaningful. And I think that whether we stumbled into it or it was just good planning or what have you, but we did end up with something that kind of took that place.
And for folks who may not be from a choral or a band or a theater background in high school, I'm going to draw a sports analogy. If you maybe participated in baseball or basketball or football, you understand that there's a system, if you will, where you're brought up from being that freshman just right out of middle school or whatever, and you learn and you follow a progression. And if you stick with it, and David, jump in if you think I'm off base here, but one of the rewards of sticking with it for 3 years is to have that senior year, just like you have that last senior football game or that last senior basketball game, and that musical is really the culmination not just of that year, and it's not just a casual association with an after-school activity, but it's really your passion play, and you've worked for 3 years plus to get to that. And if you're a high school senior, it is a big deal to have that taken away, because it puts you on a shakier ground. All of a sudden, you're seeing for the first time in your life that maybe life isn't fair. And again, I applaud the involvement of you and your support staff there to generate an effort like this, because I think it can in part replace the high school musical, but it also shows young people the value of belonging something to or participating in something that's bigger than you. And there's tremendous value to that in that period of time when you're in high school. So I applaud that. Joel, Joel is my super producer. Joel, let's bring up one more track. And David, maybe you can jump in on this and tell us a little about the selection process and who was involved.
Great.
Sure, yeah, I'm going to put it on, and if you let it play for, I would say give it like 20, 25 seconds so we can hear it a little bit, because it was cutting in and out with your mic. Here we go, ready?
So Joel, it's a great coincidence that you picked that piece. The young woman who's singing lead on that is Georgia, who would have been the lead in the school musical that we were just discussing. So that particular song is one that's almost a de facto theme song for the city of New York, and it dates back to the 1890s, I think. We feel like we came up with an arrangement there that is completely modern, but still honest to the original intention of the song. And I will say that Georgia sings the absolute heck out of it. It is a fantastic performance, and one of my favorite things I've ever been involved in recording. In fact, I tried reaching out. I sent a few emails and posted a few things. I may try again, but I want to try and get it somehow to the New York City Tourism Board and just be like, I know you've used this song in the past, but listen to this. It's completely different, and yet everybody knows it. Maybe you could use it in an ad.
Yeah, I can almost envision the backdrop to the video being really the people of New York. It just really take a completely different take on it. What did she sing that into her iPhone? I mean, what was the mechanics of recording that?
Yes, she did. It took, I don't remember how many takes. It took many. And so what we would do is, we talked about what the song would sound like. We talked about, as I said, the character. Who is this person who's singing this? And then she did a first take, and we listened to it, and I gave her notes, so to speak, as to, okay, here are some things you can think about. Go back to what you said about this character. Is that really how she would sound if she was saying this? And then there were even just some colloquialisms in it that are 120 years old, so who knows what they mean. There's a line in that song where it says, things have changed since those times. Some are up in G. And I don't know what up in G, or I didn't know what up in G means. Have you ever heard that particular term before?
No.
No, it's 120 years old. So we looked it up, and evidently what it meant was people who have moved up into highfalutin living. Up in G literally means that they're all the way up the keyboard. They've made it all the way up to high G at this point. They're in such high living. So just having that understanding of the lyric was something that took a little bit of research because it's so old.
No, it's wonderful. I again, you're hearing folks, young people who are 17 and 18 or maybe 19 years old, really at the beginning of their lives and careers, whichever direction they so choose to go in, with astonishing talent, working diligently under difficult circumstances for a cause that benefits the entire community. At which point, this is where I talk about Generation Z and millennials and sometimes the jokes that they're made sport of occasionally. And I would tell you that the young people that I've met, both on the streets of Providence, on tonight's show, if you will, virtually, at some of the schools in Providence, are a generation that are astonishing and have astonishing skills, talents, and presence in a world far more complicated than ours, in a world far more demanding, and a world certainly infinitely more competitive. And if there is a happy thought to be taken away from this, is the fact that these young people, despite all these externalities, are managing to thrive, often despite it. Think about the next time you talk about a millennial or a Generation Z. David, I know that there's a lot of uncertainties going next year for everybody everywhere. Interestingly enough, we've got 60 or 70 days, if you will, to the first day of school, and I'm not sure anyone can even begin to bet on what the landscape is going to be looking like 60 or 70 days. But should the quote-unquote worst happen, and it's really not that bad, but it is challenging, what lessons have you learned from this approach, this remote learning process, and, are you ready to do it all over again?
Well, the first thing that we learned is that we can do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not ideal. It's not anyone's choice for the best way to teach. But I feel like we've proven that we can do this, and we don't know what next year will look like. But I think that on some level we're preparing for some mix of classroom and virtual teaching. And if that's what it needs to be, then we've already sort of had our practice run, so to speak. We know what works and what doesn't. I couldn't have imagined in March that it was possible to teach a chorus class into a computer, but we're figuring it out, and we're getting we're making some progress. And I think that if we need to do it more, then we will, have all of this experience upon which to draw. That said, obviously, we all want to be back in our classrooms. The students do, the teachers do, administration does. It's best for everyone, but we only want to do that if it's safe. So whatever the best plan is coming down from the state government, that's what we'll do. We'll make it work, and we will continue to teach these students all of this important stuff that we've been doing.
Well, again, I think congratulations to, first off, your students for an astonishing performance, one that should be celebrated, I think, by the entire state of Rhode Island. Congratulations on the direction of their efforts in supporting such a wonderful charity. Of course, folks, there is a GoFundMe up there. It's linked everywhere throughout the coalition and on David's pages to support the Providence Rescue Mission. A reasonable goal has been set. I would expect us to somehow, and I know these are challenging times for folks, to share based on what the students of Mount Hope High School have just shared with us. I know that we're going to do a little bit of a match to see if we can get people excited about it. And David, congratulations to you, because we live in a world of controversy and sometimes diminished expectations, and we live in a world where we're, particularly with the events ongoing now, we're quick to be cynical. Yet, despite that, folks like you and the staff at your high school continue to outperform and continue to astonish, continue to raise the bar. And perhaps all of us can, present company included, can learn from that. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and congratulations on you and the choral at the Mount Hope Senior High School.
Pat, thank you so much for having me here. And if I may say, I hope that you continue this series. This is a wonderful idea, and having an outlet where we can discuss some of the great artistic output of the people of Rhode Island would just be welcome. So thank you for allowing me to be on and be your first guest with this. And anyone who can help with our fundraiser, thank you as well. We really appreciate it.
Well, folks, if you're interested in joining us, it's pford@coalitionradio.us, or just send us something on our Facebook page or Twitter. It's easy enough, and let's take it out. Let's just play a little bit more, Joel, if you're out there, of again the sidewalk of New York. Folks, have a wonderful night. We'll see you soon.